I think this is his last shot. I think that they could go. I don't think any manner of excuses saves his job this year.
Yeah.
I think if they don't make the playoffs, he's not back. I think if they make the playoffs, he's back. But I think that's going to be the benchmark for him is do they make the playoffs?
Today's Friday, June 29th. This is the Cowboys Beat on CLNS Media. I'm R.A. Temkin. A couple of weeks ago, NFL Network analyst and Pro Football Hall of Famer Deion Sanders said something crazy. Well, at least it sounded crazy at the time. Deion Sanders suggested that the Cowboys and Dez Bryant bury the hatchet and that Dez Bryant re-sign with the Dallas Cowboys. He thought that both sides would benefit from bringing the beleaguered wide receiver back to Dallas. And so he basically made a plea for both sides to find common ground, end this charade, and bring Dez back to the Dallas Cowboys. It was initially laughed off, I think, by most parties as being outlandish, as being crazy. Because if you recall, and we discussed this on the Cowboys Beat way back when, but the first thing that Dez Bryant did when he was released was go to any media member with a microphone and tell them about the people that did him wrong in the Dallas Cowboys organization. And they started with Jason Garrett, the team's head coach. Dez Bryant called out, quote-unquote, Garrett guys. And as I said way back when on the Cowboys Beat, if there were any reservations about why Dez Bryant should no longer be with the Cowboys, they should have been firmly addressed in the immediate aftermath of being released when he sought out any media member with a microphone and called out Garrett guys. That's not a guy you want in your locker room. That's not a guy that helps your team. And that didn't even take into account the diminishing numbers that we've seen over the course of the last few years after he signed that mega deal. It doesn't even take into account all of the other components. It just simply takes into account exactly what he did, his first act after being released by the Cowboys, which was to call out, quote-unquote, Garrett guys. Guys that bought into the coach's message, and guys that, because of that, alienated Dez Bryant. Never mind the fact that Brian Broaddus from DallasCowboys.com told me on the Cowboys Beat that Jason Garrett was the last guy to sign off on Dez Bryant's release. Never mind that. So yeah, Deion. There is no reasonable person that believes that Dez Bryant should be back with the Dallas Cowboys. And I think Dez Bryant's a good football player. I thought Dez Bryant has been a really good football player. I like the leadership. I think there are certain components of his demeanor that are positive on an NFL sideline. I think there are a lot of positive things that the Cowboys will be missing. But with all that being said, as soon as you're released, when you call out the organization and the team and the head coach and you undermine that authority, you have written your ticket out of town forever. So why am I bringing this back up on the Cowboys Beat, you might be asking? It's a reasonable question to ask when, again, it was a crazy point to be made by Deion Sanders at the time. Because this conversation continues to rear its head throughout Cowboy Nation. Now, this is the official dead period of the Cowboys offseason. They are officially done with OTAs. Mandatory minicamp is in the rearview mirror. So the next thing to look forward to is training camp, which is still weeks away. A month away, to be exact. The Cowboys will officially report to Oxnard, California on July 25th. Rookies will report before then, but they won't really start until July 25th. So, yeah, about a month away from training camp starting. So, as Dez Bryant remains unsigned, more and more people are starting to look at what Deion Sanders said and give it credence, give it some authority. It's becoming more and more of a talking point from Cowboys fans and members of Dallas Cowboys media. And to that end, multiple people who listen to this podcast, thank you, have posed the same question to me on Twitter. at RE Sports, ARI Sports. Any chance the Cowboys bring back Dez? Should the Cowboys bring back Dez? No. And again, I still think Dez Bryant is a productive wide receiver in the National Football League. I still see major value in him as a player, as a leader. I'm shocked that Dez Bryant remains unsigned. It seems unfathomable that a guy that appeared in 16 games last year, had 69 receptions and 838 yards and 6 touchdowns, that a guy that puts up those numbers and still has a ton of talent is unsigned. I have no idea why he's unsigned. But I know that the Dallas Cowboys have told us all offseason that they want to make this team, say it with me, Dak friendly. What that means in particular is not just one receiver calling for the ball when he's got single coverage of the outside, but a multitude of receivers with different skill sets that Dak can spread the ball around with. When Dak was at his best his rookie year, that's what he was doing. He was finding all different receivers at all different times. When you look at the games that Dak played his best his rookie year, you'd have 5, 6, 7 different receivers catch balls for them in those particular games. And he's even mentioned that multiple times throughout this offseason in different interviews, that he's more comfortable being able to move around, spread the ball around, find different guys open. And that has been the one track of the Cowboys this offseason. They have improved their teams through the draft. They've made a few moves here or there in free agency, a couple of little moves here or there. They've obviously revamped their coaching staff. But seemingly everything they've done this entire offseason has been to fix this issue that they perceive to be at the wide receiver position. They do not want a number one receiver by design. By design. If the question is, can the Cowboys be successful without a number one wide receiver? The Cowboys are answering. Scott Linehan and Jason Garrett are saying, yes, absolutely we can be successful without a number one receiver. In fact, that's what we're doing. We're doing that because we think our quarterback is better when he's spreading the ball around, getting different people involved. And that was exactly what they tried to do this offseason. They signed Allen Hurns even before they released Dez Bryant. They traded for Tavon Austin at the draft. They drafted Michael Gallup. They have what they believe improved their wide receiving core. Now, when you look at the fantasy football preseason rankings and preseason analysis, it tells a completely different story. Their offense is not going to be conducive to major fantasy football numbers. Their running back will be. Zeke Elliott's a top 5 fantasy pick, but none of the receivers will be. Dak might be, but none of the receivers will be because of this exact concept. Spreading the ball around. One day, Cole Beasley could have 110 yards receiving. The next week, Michael Gallup could have 110 yards receiving. The next week, Allen Hurns could have 150 yards receiving, right? Like, that's the idea, that every week they get Zeke involved and then use his success to get other wide receivers the ball in different spots. And maybe most important to all this was the addition of Sanjay Lal, the receivers coach, who, when he was signed in the first offseason signing for any of their new coaches, Sanjay Lal, they talked about just how diligent he is when it comes to teaching precise route running. These are all things that we've been over ad nauseum on the Cowboys beat. And the bottom line here is, this is the bed Jason Garrett and Scott Linehan have made. They have made this their mission to correct. They believe the key to building a successful offense around Dak Prescott with Zeke Elliott is through this means. It's not through Dez Bryant. It is through a bunch of different guys that you can spread the ball around and have a bunch of different guys highlighted every single week. Now, whether or not it works is neither here nor there. Because either the Cowboys are going to miss the playoffs if Jason Garrett and Scott Linehan are out of a job, or they'll be proven correct, and they'll win and make the playoffs, and everybody will forget that Dez Bryant was a major talking point this entire offseason. Coming up after our interview with Bobby Belt from Cowboys Cast, we continue our series where we're taking a look and breaking down each positional group for the Dallas Cowboys. Last week, we took a look at the defensive line. We've also already looked at the wide receivers and the linebacking core. So what we're going to do is take a look at the quarterbacks, where there's a major question mark about who is going to be backing up Dak Prescott in 2018. But first, let's talk with Bobby Belt from the Cowboys Cast. And Bobby, how are you doing today?
I'm making it. How are you?
Trying to make it. When I say to you, could Dez Bryant come back to the Dallas Cowboys, what do you think?
I think absolutely not. Although, see, the weird thing is that there are a lot of people that I really respect and I really like who keep saying, well, of course it's possible, but it's just not likely. And that's a little interesting to me because they're not people who would normally, I think, if they knew the things I knew, or, that they would say absolutely
Right.
not like I do. So that makes me wonder if maybe they just know something that I don't or heard something that I didn't. But, everybody I've talked to, I'd say, no, I think that ship has sailed.
Yeah, when I first heard it, Deion Sanders first said it, and I was like, yeah, it's just Deion talking crazy, no, he basically called out the head coach and players like Garrett guys. Like, you can't say that and then come back. And on top of that, as you mentioned, there's other things also, underneath the surface. So but yet to your point, this continues to be a topic. It's mind blowing. I mean, first of all, he's not signed by other teams. So that shows you the kind of demand that there is for him. But I also think there's something to this idea of let's let Jason Garrett die on his sword. If Jason Garrett believes that this is the way and the style for which Dak Prescott has to play, he's got to be able to spread the ball around, different receivers, then either the Cowboys are going to win, be successful, make the playoffs, and everybody's going to be happy, or they're going to lose and they're going to fire Jason Garrett because of it. So there's that element of that too.
Yeah, and I think that, if there was a question or a possibility for him to come back, it all, lays with the Cowboys because Dez Bryant would come back in an instant.
Yeah.
So if there is any sort of a possibility, I mean, right now, the fact that he's not signed means that Dallas doesn't want him to be here. And so, I don't know what would have changed since they cut him that would have made them reconsider anything. They got Michael Gallup, who they had a second round grade on, and they got him in the third, so they should be happy with him. I know they like Cedric Wilson. Lance Lenore and Noah Brown have earned a lot of praise this offseason, and they got Allen Hurns, and they had Allen Hurns when they cut Dez. And so they felt comfortable enough moving on from him with their entire current crop of receivers, Sands, Gallup, and Wilson, and they like Gallup and Wilson, so they've only added players they really like since then. And so I just don't see a possibility of it. I think, like I said, he would come back in an instant. He never wanted to leave here. I think that, from what I've been told, Garrett was one of the last ones actually to jump on board and say, all right, let's make this move. And so I think it was more a Steven thing, and I think Steven's pretty much got his mind made up, and I would not see him going back on that.
Yeah, good point. Bobby Belt from Cowboys Cast joining us in the Cowboys beat. I'm just going to ask you to take a guess here, but who do you think leads the Cowboys in receptions this season?
Oh, gosh. Well, I mean, the nightmare scenario would be like Ezekiel Elliott, like when the Cowboys,
Yeah.
like in 2003, had Richie Anderson lead them in receptions as they went to the playoffs. So that'd be really bad. Man, that's like Cole Beasley, I would guess, probably. I mean, he is pretty much the lone safety valve now that Jason Witten's gone.
Yep.
And I mean, you never know what the health of other guys or what exactly the opportunities they're going to get. I think Cole Beasley is going to become the number one go-to check down option. I mean, he'll have his normal routes. He'll still get some other things, but I think when in doubt, Dak's going to dump to Beasley. And usually the when in doubt guy is the one that leads your team in receptions. So I would guess it's probably going to be Cole Beasley. It's just, he's going to have to work harder to get free of those double teams this year or see less of them. That's going to be the big thing for him.
Right. And what's amazing is, how will that happen, right? Like if you think that Zeke playing and being available for all 16 games, that commands extra attention. So maybe that draws extra attention away from Cole. But I mean, you're right. That was the difference between Cole Beasley 2 years ago and Cole Beasley last year, was creating that separation because teams just double teamed him and took him away last year. So I guess the question is, what can they do to counteract that?
I mean, there's not much. He's just going to have to start beating double teams, or your other guys are going to have to perform at a higher level and force those double teams away from him. I don't think people are going to default double team him this year to start. But if they start seeing that, Allen Hurns isn't, making the progress they want of him, and if Michael Gallup isn't the guy they thought he was going to be, then, you'll probably start seeing them shift down and double team Beasley again, which is what they did last year. When they realized we can get away with covering these guys one-on-one, then let's double the one guy we can't cover one-on-one, which was Beasley. And so it's a matter of they're going to have Allen Hurns and Michael Gallup and Terrence Williams and guys like that are going to have to make teams pay for covering them one-on-one. If they do that, that frees up Beasley, and that can soften things a little bit.
I'm assuming you watched All or Nothing. I know it'll jog your memory a little bit, but what were some of the takeaways and thoughts you had from that show?
I know a lot of people thought that, wow, Jason Garrett's the big star here. Look at it. It's like, why? Because he cusses like we knew he cussed. Like, I mean, you've seen him slip up before, or, you'll see on that unedited NFL films footage. So, I mean, that wasn't that big a deal to me. One of the things that really stood out to me, and, there was a lot talked about from that series, whether it be the Dez and Jordan Lewis one-on-one, or, kind of the way Zeke handled himself or things like that. But a couple things stood out to me. One was the relationship Dak Prescott and Jason Garrett have, which seems really strong. And it's pretty obvious that he's got a good relationship with Jerry Jones as well. And they just kind of revamped their receiving core for Dak Prescott. And so, as much as people have said, well, this year's make or break for Dak Prescott, I don't think it is. I think they're all in on Dak Prescott. And I think you can read the tea leaves and see that. And I think that All or Nothing kind of solidified that even more when you saw the type of relationship he has with Jason Garrett. And so I think this organization is fully behind him, and they really believe in him. But the other thing that stood out to me, and it was just a scene, but it was one that I thought was really interesting. I don't think it got enough play for as much as everything else was talked about. And that was the scene at the end of the year where he's meeting with his coaching staff. And he's basically kind of intimating, like, some of y'all have been insubordinate. I mean, he doesn't say that so much, but he kind of says, like, all of our jobs are on the line. As, we look to who's coming back next year, I don't want guys who are going to, roll their eyes when we're trying to get messages across, or I don't want people, who are going to whisper about, oh yeah, another Garrett mantra or what have you.
Right. There's got to be one message. It's got to be Jason Garrett's message, and I don't want anybody to roll their eyes. I want everybody on board with that one message. Otherwise, you're not going to be here. Yeah, which I think that was a really interesting scene to me, because it's like, okay, that tells me that there's some, there's some tension there, between the coaching staff that probably didn't get a lot of play. And I think it's probably easy to figure out which guys were they. Well, it's probably some of, if not all, the guys that weren't brought back. It was a lot of the coaching staff. Yeah, I'm with you, dude. That was, to me, if you were to ask me the same question, that would be my response, was that. Because first of all, it's like, Jason, shouldn't you be saying that at the beginning of the season? This is my message. Let's follow my message. I'm the coach. Also, if you're the coach and you inspire your subordinates, like, they follow your message because they want to follow your message, because they're inspired by your message. So, like, you shouldn't have to tell people that you're leading to listen to your message. Then you're not a leader. And, to me, ultimately it was, well, this isn't an off-season about making the team Dak friendly. It's about making the off-season was about making the team Garrett friendly. And that's why we see the oldest player on their offense is Tyron Smith. We see the oldest player on their team is Sean Lee. Like, he's got that rah-rah college kind of, pump you up, college coach kind of mentality. And he's got a young group of players that reflects that. And I think his coaching staff does too, because I think, you don't need young coaches in order to have that, but you need new coaches, because I think the older coaches, the guys that have been here for a long time, the Derek Dooleys of the world, they were kind of, they didn't buy into the message as much, because I think when you get into the professional ranks, that rah-rah college coach type Jason Garrett mentality, it weighs on people, and it goes away. It's not as effective.
Yeah, and I mean, people have always said that was, one of the Jim Harbaugh flaws, was that Jim Harbaugh coarsened on people and was, his I'm the boss, you are beneath me type of handling of guys worked when it was a, team of 24-year-olds. And then as they grew into veterans, they started not, wanting to put up with it anymore. So yeah, I think that Jason Garrett friendly is probably fair. I think that, I think this is his last shot. I think that they could go. I don't think any manner of excuses saves his job this year.
Yeah.
I think if they don't make the playoffs, he's not back. I think if they make the playoffs, he's back. But I think that's going to be the benchmark for him is do they make the playoffs? And I think that you're looking at a complete reset if that happens. I think that they'd fire Jason Garrett. I think they'd fire Scott Linehan. Rod Marinelli's already on his way out. He is, for all intents and purposes, semi-retired. Chris Richard's taking over this defense next season.
Yep.
Or after this next season. So I think that, if things don't, 9-7 and missing the playoffs isn't going to be good enough this year. I think that you will see an entirely new coaching staff, which that could mean, or at the top anyway, with your coordinators and your head coach. And who knows what kind of ramifications that'll have on your position groups, like, your corners, which could all potentially be reset rather easily, contracts that could be moved and reset, your defensive line, where you can move on from a lot of guys off of that group. Your receivers are all basically signed to 1-year contracts right now. You can get out of every single last receiver's deal except basically Michael Gallup and Cedric Wilson next season if you wanted to. So I think I think the Cowboys kind of look at this as a convergence of this is everybody's chance to prove it, and we're going to kind of put ourselves in a position to where at the end of the season we can evaluate who we want to keep and who we want to get rid of on the roster and on the coaching staff. And so I think you'll see that it's going to be a big year for a number of people who are going to be really working for their jobs in 2019.
Every guest that I've had on the Cowboys beat throughout this offseason, I've asked the same question to. Over under 9.5 wins.
Assuming everybody's healthy, of course, because you can't predict the injury. So just basing it off of if they're completely healthy, under 8 or 9 wins. Yeah, because I
hate to imagine because they're not. What's the chances they're going to be 100% healthy?
Because they're not. Yeah, I think that basically what I'm anticipating is, you've lost Jason Witten, who is a massive leader in that locker room, a massive presence in that locker room. You lost Des Bryant. Locker room culture is going to be completely new, and I don't know exactly how that chemistry is going to go. You've got a really young secondary. You're going to be missing David Irving for the first 4 games of the year again. You've got, DeMarcus Lawrence, who played well last year, but is he an Albert Haynesworth, just play for my money type, and will take a step back? So if there are questions about the pass rush, you've got a young secondary who are going to have growing pains. They're going to make mistakes. That's why you need a strong pass rush to fix it. They drafted Leighton Vander Esch, but we still don't know completely what they have at linebacker. There's still a lot of unknown, and their entire receiver and tight end group is a group of guys they like that they're trying to figure out just how good they are. So there's a lot of unproven talent on this team, and even if they are the type of players that Dallas thinks they are, I think that you're going to have a time where everything's sort of melding and everybody's getting into a rhythm and they're trying to, get their sea legs. And I don't know that this is the best year for Jason Garrett to have a, do it or don't type of season, because there's a lot of different variables that are going to need to come together this year.
Bobby Belt, follow him on Twitter at BobbyBeltTX. Check out his work at the Cowboys Cast. Appreciate your time, man. Be well.
I appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you to Bobby Belt for joining us here on the Cowboys Beat. I am Ari Temkin. And every single week on the Cowboys Beat, I've been breaking down positional groups as we move on throughout the offseason. We've looked at the linebacking core. We've looked at the wide receivers. We've looked at the defensive line. Today, we're going to go back to the offense and take a look at the quarterbacks, which sounds kind of funny because, well, Dak Prescott's the starter, so what else do you need to know, right? Dak Prescott has started 33 of a possible 33 NFL games in his first 2 seasons, so he is extraordinarily reliable. And it's amazing considering 2015, the backup quarterback situation was what undid the Dallas Cowboys. At the end of Romo's career, he dealt with all different kinds of issues. Basically, he was seemingly at a point to where every sack he took was a long absence for Tony Romo on the disabled list. In 2015, the Cowboys had their smorgasbord of crappiness with Brandon Weeden, Kellen Moore, and Matt Castle, and they went 1-11 during that stretch without Romo. But it seems like those days are long gone with Dak Prescott starting 33 of a possible 33 to start his NFL career. But there is an interesting backup quarterback controversy brewing with the Cowboys that I do think is probably one of the more underappreciated, more underrated aspects going into training camp, and one of the more underappreciated, underrated battles at training camp. Cooper Rush is the presumptive backup to Dak Prescott. Cooper Rush was an undrafted free agent last season. He moved past Kellen Moore on the depth chart, and which was just a gamer. He was basically Dak Prescott. Prescott coming into the draft, the reason he slipped was because of accuracy issues, concerns about his ability as a quote-unquote practice player, things that you'd see in practice. And we even saw that in his first training camp. I mean, he was overshooting wide receivers. He just looked like a fourth-round pick that wasn't ready to start games. But then the lights came on in the preseason, and he was a gamer. Cooper Rush is kind of the same way, where he doesn't show up in a big way during practices or during drills, but in scrimmages, in preseason games, there's just something about him where when the lights are on, he just performs. And that was the single reason that Cooper Rush became the Cowboys' backup quarterback, even though Kellen Moore was the guy that had the experience. So a year later, and the Cowboys do the surprising thing by drafting a quarterback in the 5th round. They took Mike White out of Western Kentucky. And so either Mike White becomes the backup and Cooper Rush is released, or Cooper Rush is the backup, Mike White is the third string, and the Cowboys keep 3 quarterbacks on their roster, which seems kind of unlikely because when you break it down, you look at the numbers. With David Irving missing the first 4 games of the season, do you think they're going to end up carrying an extra defensive lineman? There's questions about whether or not the Cowboys are going to carry an extra wide receiver because Tavon Austin's kind of a receiver running back hybrid. So it I guess would take a lot for the Cowboys to carry 3 quarterbacks. But they also invested a 5th-round draft pick into Mike White. So there's legitimacy to the idea that they could keep 3 quarterbacks. Mike White, by the way, at Western Kentucky, in 2 seasons at Western Kentucky, Mike White had 8,554 yards, 63 touchdowns, and 15 picks. 8,500 yards passing at Western Kentucky in 2 seasons. And he's got all the tools. He's 6'5", he's 220. So I think, part of the reason the Cowboys drafted him in the 5th round, not like they had a needed quarterback, was they just couldn't pass up that talent. The size, the ability, the ridiculous stats that he put up at Western Kentucky in just 2 seasons. So it's going to be interesting. In OTAs, seemingly you could give the nod to Cooper Rush, but that's just based on familiarity and the fact that Cooper's been here before. And if you're looking at, experience, Cooper Rush has experience. Well, yeah, he's got 1 more season than Mike White. And, 1 more completion in the NFL than Mike White. Which I think is a good thing. Because to me, experience seems to always be the trump card when it comes to the quarterback position and the backup versus the younger guy. And last year it wasn't. Cooper Rush, undrafted free agent quarterback, became the backup and replaced Kellen Moore. So the Cowboys went with the talent and ability over experience, which I love. And they could do the exact same thing in back-to-back years and have another rookie quarterback in back-to-back seasons backing up Dak Prescott. I think that's what they want. They don't want to keep 3 quarterbacks. They want to keep Mike White, who was a unbelievable college prospect and a guy that could develop well under Dak Prescott. I think they saw a lot they liked from Cooper Rush, but they'd prefer not to keep three quarterbacks, and they couldn't pass up on Mike White because he's so talented, has the measurables, has the ability, and he was available to them in the 5th round. Again, Dak Prescott has started 33 out of a possible 33 games in his first 2 years, so chances are you won't even remember who the quarterback is midway through the year. But there are obviously concerns from Cowboys fans about Dak Prescott as the starting quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys, concerns about whether or not he could be the guy. Now, I'm on the record multiple times as saying he is absolutely that guy, and that when you look at the composition of his career, it's obvious that last year, the blip that he hit was a byproduct of missing Tyron Smith at left tackle, and then the psychological toll that took on him mentally after the Atlanta game. But that doesn't mean there isn't room for legitimate concern. So if there is legitimate concern for Dak Prescott as the future starting quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys, then who they keep, Cooper Rush, Mike White, or both, is a tremendous storyline to watch heading into training camp. Thank you, everybody, for listening to the Cowboys Beat right here on CLNS Media. Again, I am Ari Temkin. You can find me on Twitter at Ari Sports, ARI Sports. A reminder that I stream every single day, noon Central, Showtime on Phantom. That is facebook.com/watch Phantom, Phantom spelled Phantom. So check me out there. Again, make sure to subscribe and rate the podcast. That's going to help us as well on iTunes. Make sure to rate the podcast. But thank you no matter where you're watching, whether it be on the CLNS Media app, whether it be on Stitcher or iTunes. Thank you so much for listening and subscribing. But for now, I'm out. Peace.